The settlement of Carthex Prime had 3 rules. Don't feed the locals, don't touch the wildlife, and never ever run toward danger. Rhea had broken all 3 within her first week. The Carthexians were a proud species, apex predators on their own world, standing nearly 8 feet tall with sleek obsidian fur and claws that could shred reinforced steel. They had joined the Galactic Council only 2 cycles ago, and the cultural exchange program was meant to foster understanding between species. Rhea, a xenobiologist from Earth, had volunteered immediately. Not because she was diplomatic, because she was curious, and because she had a weakness for things with teeth. Tyrek was barely 6 months old, still small enough to trip over his own paws. His mother, High Commander Syrinx, had initially forbidden any interaction between the human and her cub. But Rhea had a way with creatures, a patience that transcended language. She would sit at the edge of the training grounds just watching, her hands always visible, her movements predictable. Eventually, Tyrek's curiosity had overcome his mother's warnings. The cub had approached her one evening, sniffing cautiously. Rhea had remained perfectly still, letting him investigate. When his rough tongue had licked her hand, she'd laughed, a sound that made every adult Carthexian in earshot reach for their weapons. But Tyrek had purred, a deep rumble that shook his entire body. From that moment, they were inseparable. The Carthexians didn't understand it. Humans were prey species, soft, weak, with no natural weapons. Their eyes faced forward like predators, true, but they were small, slow, and died so easily. When Syrinx had asked why Rhea wasn't afraid, the human had simply shrugged and said, "He's just a baby." The concept had no translation in Carthexian. Their young were born with instincts honed by millions of years of evolution. They hunted from the moment they could walk. There was no such thing as just a baby. But Rhea treated Tyrek like one anyway. She played with him, taught him Earth games, and even snuck him treats from her rations despite rule number 1. The other humans in the settlement thought she was insane. The Carthexians thought she was suicidal. Rhea thought they all needed to relax. The attack came without warning. The Vrex were a scavenger species, opportunistic raiders who preyed on settlements along the frontier. They had assumed Carthex Prime would be easy pickings, a new colony still finding its footing. They had been catastrophically wrong about the Carthexians' combat capabilities, but they had been right about the chaos. The first plasma bolts lit up the evening sky like artificial lightning. Alarms shrieked through the settlement. Rhea had been in her quarters cataloging samples when the explosions began. She'd grabbed her emergency pack and headed for the shelters until she heard it. A whimper. High-pitched, terrified, barely audible over the gunfire. Tyrek. Her rational mind screamed at her to keep moving. The shelters were close. Trained soldiers were handling the situation. There was nothing she could do. She was a scientist, not a fighter. She would only get in the way, but her legs were already moving. She sprinted toward the training grounds, toward the sound of weapons fire and screaming. Other colonists stared at her like she'd lost her mind. A Carthexian warrior tried to grab her arm, snarling something she didn't stop to translate. She ducked under his reach and kept running. The training grounds were a war zone. Vrex raiders, their insectoid armor glinting in the firelight, had breached the perimeter. They were fast, coordinated, and utterly unprepared for the fury of the Carthexian defenders. Bodies, both Vrex and Carthexian, littered the ground, and in the center of it all, huddled behind an overturned transport, was Tyrek. 3 Vrex soldiers were closing in on him, their weapons raised. The cub's eyes were wide with terror, his ears flat against his skull. He whimpered again, a sound that drove ice picks through Rhea's chest. She didn't think. Thinking was for people who wanted to survive. Rhea launched herself at the nearest Vrex, her emergency pack swinging like a flail. It connected with the raider's helmet with a satisfying crack. The creature stumbled, more surprised than hurt. Before it could recover, Rhea had grabbed its weapon, some kind of plasma rifle, and fired point blank into its thorax. The second Vrex turned toward her, mandibles clicking in what might have been laughter. It raised its weapon. Rhea was faster. The plasma bolt took it in the head and it collapsed in a smoking heap. The third Vrex hesitated, its compound eyes flickering between the human and the cub. That hesitation cost it. Rhea fired 3 times in rapid succession, each shot finding its mark. Silence fell over the training grounds, broken only by the distant sound of fighting and Tyrek's rapid breathing. Rhea dropped the weapon, her hand shaking. She'd never killed anything before. Not like this. Her stomach churned, threatening to rebel. Then Tyrek was against her, his massive head pressing into her chest, purring so loudly she could feel it in her bones. She wrapped her arms around him, burying her face in his fur. "It's okay," she whispered, even though she was the one trembling. "It's okay." When the battle was over and the Vrex had retreated, Sarex found them like that, human and cub, tangled together in the wreckage. The High Commander approached slowly, her claws retracted, her head tilted in that peculiar Carthexian expression of confusion. "You ran toward the gunfire," Sarex said, her translator rendering the words flat and emotionless, but there was something in her eyes, something Rhea couldn't quite name. "He whimpered," Rhea replied, as if that explained everything. To her surprise, Sarex's expression shifted into what might have been a smile. It was a terrifying sight, all teeth and predatory intent, but genuine nonetheless. "We have a saying," the High Commander continued. "The strong protect the strong. It is how we have survived." She paused, studying Rhea with new understanding. "But humans protect the weak, even when it means becoming prey. Especially then," Rhea corrected softly. Sarex rumbled, a sound of deep approval. "Perhaps that is why you are more dangerous than you appear." She reached down, gently extracting her son from Rhea's grip. Tyrek protested, but his mother was insistent. As she carried him away, Sarex looked back one last time. "Thank you, Rhea of Earth. You have honored my house. You have honored my son." Her eyes gleamed in the firelight. "And you have shown us that courage is not measured in claws or teeth. Sometimes it is measured in the distance one will run toward danger." Rhea watched them go, her body finally catching up to what she'd done. Her legs gave out and she sat heavily on the scorched ground. She'd broken rule number 3 spectacularly, and she'd do it again in a heartbeat.